Have a great group here tonight to present. You'll remember back in the summer we had the Swappin Stories project that we did, and so we've got Miss Caitlin, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it, so say it for me. Hochuli. We got Dr. Leah Panther, Presley Dyer, and then zooming in all the way from Texas, we have Lindsey Walker, and they are the group that has really coordinated and got this off the ground. So they're going to tell you a lot about that project, what got it started, how it went, and where it's going from here. So let's welcome them tonight.
Okay, so thank you all again for coming. One of the big questions that we got a lot was, how did this come together? Who was behind the project? And there were lots of different people, but typically when that question was asked, everyone would kind of turn and point to me. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit more about me, and then also, how the different groups came together for the project. So my name is Lindsey Walker. I'm from Hiawassee. I'm the daughter of Kenny and Vicki Walker, the granddaughter of Allison Fiddle and Howard Cunningham, and the great-granddaughter of Maud and Charlie Hicks. And I'm a graduate of McConnell Preschool and Towns County Schools. And when I was presenting I'm also a PhD candidate in the Literacy, Language, and Culture Department at TWU. And I was presenting research at the AERA conference, and of the tens of thousands of educational researchers that were there, I happened to bump into Leah. And at that point, I said, I know my tag says Texas, but I see that your tag says Georgia, and my tag says Texas, but I'm from Georgia, specifically North Georgia in the mountains. And we started talking about Northeast Georgia and the mountains and Appalachian languages and literacies, and connected that way. And we started talking about kind of the gaps of the existing research around those topics. And from there, I started doing a little bit more research around Appalachian languages and literacies, and continued to see that there wasn't a lot of information even within Appalachian scholarly research. And at that point, I reached out to my long-term friend, who's also a graduate of McConnell Preschool and Towns County Schools, Presley Dyer, and she was working at Tennessee State at the time until she was recruited by Georgia Tech to come and be their metadata librarian. And we researched together, and we kind of saw the same thing, where there isn't a lot of information about Northeast Georgia's Appalachian languages and literacies, even when looking through an Appalachian scholarship lens. So we wanted to kind of, change that, figure out what to do about that now that we had identified that, kind of what we felt was true was actually the case. And so at that point, we reached out to Tyler and Mr. Taylor and talked to them about some existing stuff that y'all were doing at the Historical Society and how we could work together. And from there, we started thinking about, okay, thinking about longevity of preserving Towns County history and languages and literacies. And at that point, I reached out to my cousin, Carrie Abernathy, who would be with us here tonight, but she is coaching a basketball game. She's currently a ELAR teacher at the middle school, and she was also really excited about the idea of, really gathering more information about local history and getting that information into the hands of her students and connecting it with their ELAR standards. And then from there, Dr. Leah went and talked with Kim Eccles, who couldn't be here tonight. She's in a class, and Caitlin Hochuli, who's here tonight, and their graduate research assistants. They also were extremely excited about the idea and the topics. And then a big thing when you're talking about digitizing and preservation is, how do we house that information? Who has the space? Who has the capacity? Who has the funding? And we were really fortunate to make a connection to Dr. Tamara Livingston at Kennesaw State through their Department of Rare Books, Museums, and Archives. And they also have a common mission of preserving Georgia's oral histories And similar to everywhere else in the nation, they didn't have a lot of North Georgia information. And so they were really excited to hear more about what we wanted to try to do and to partner with us. And they agreed to house that information digitally that we were hoping to collect at this point, right? So from there, we reached out to wonderful Historical Society volunteers, and we also carry kind of spearheaded connecting with some other teachers at the middle school who were in the humanities to kind of get their input on other things that they felt like might be interesting to students that they're working with currently. So we really had 3 goals for the project, and the first one was to collect, digitize, and preserve the history of Towns County. We learned that Towns County was one of the least digitized counties in the state, so we had the least amount of records that are digitized. And I think an important clarification is just when something's like scanned in and online, right, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily preserved. It needs to be people need to be able to find it and locate it and not just have that picture scanned necessarily, but to know the background behind it. And that's really where the archiving and digitization comes in, which Presley's going to talk a lot more about later. Their second goal was to preserve Appalachian language literacy practices and histories, specifically thinking about for school-based purposes, community-based educators, and for language literacy and history educational scholars, because a lot of times when there's an absence of information, assumptions are made that culture or that history isn't there, and either outside information fills in gaps that's not necessarily accurate, or people just assume it doesn't exist, and that's not true, as we all know. And our third goal was also just to demonstrate that the Historical Society is a viable organization to receive capital funding, grants, and investments for not only a research room, but also an archival space, so this work can continue and grow. So we went about that we had to kind of strategically and logistically think about, taking this from an idea to a reality. And so thinking about learning, we needed to know more about archiving. Presley knew a lot about archiving, but the rest of us had a lot to learn. So the part of the team did some field trips to the Georgia archives, learned more about digitization. We were able to purchase some new equipment and talk about metadata structures, which Presley's going to explain more to us about that as well. And then we had to think about a location for the event. We wanted something that was, central, easy for folks to get to, ADA accessible, that had different noise-proof spaces. And McConnell was really gracious and offered us their space, and so we were able to secure the location that way. And then we began to advertise the event through in the Herald, social media, flyers, and the Historical Society meetings. So when participants came into the space, you could either sign up to bring in your items, or you could just walk in. And I would greet people at the door, and there was a space for them to sit and fill out that initial intake paperwork. So when individuals came in, I would share with them the release form, just stating that all the items that they were bringing with them, they would be taking home with them. And the goal of the project, again, was just to really digitize them and collect those stories related to those items and get that out into the wider public for educational purposes. There was also a form just stating that they were voluntarily sharing their information, and that Kennesaw, again, was going to be housing that information online for us. And hosting all of that data and working alongside us. So all those items were there. And then there was also a metadata sheet that Presley created just to kind of get that information. Again, thinking about digitization in the sense of not just scanning a photo, but also, what year was this? What's your connection to this? Who's in these pictures? Who's in this this item that you're bringing that we're scanning? And then depending on what people brought in, I would take them to a different room, because we had some scanners that were better for photographs and things like that, and then others that would be better if there was a family Bible, for example.
So once Lindsey kind of checked everybody in, our participants were sent to different rooms. We had 4 set up, and we're going to go through each of those rooms, but the most important part of everything that we really had were our volunteers in the room. So As you saw in that first one, all of the names that were up there, we were each in one room, but we also had volunteers from the Towns County Historical Society that really made this happen. So I know it's dark, but if you don't mind giving a wave, if you were one of the volunteers that helped out. Woo! Thank you so much for your help. And then in the room, you'll see we had quite a setup. At each, as the participants came into the room, we tried to make it very friendly so that they were able to just walk in. There was a microphone set up, and then they could kind of position themselves wherever they would be most comfortable. In the room, we had a computer that was set up for recording all of the data that was being collected, both audio and the digital version of their artifact, and then a hard drive that connected to that computer to make sure that the data was super backed up because we didn't want to lose it. We also had different types of scanners, so talked about that a little bit. In this room, there was a flatbed scanner that really was for photos or anything that was more of a document. We also had these 3D scanners we'll see later, so that we could record the images of those items. And then we had a microphone, so as our participants came in, they were able to talk through and share the story of their artifact. And then while we were listening and being really careful with the artifacts, one of the things that we had to do and made sure was how are we protecting these artifacts? It's very important to the families and the participants. So we had gloves to make sure that we were handling the items and being very careful with them, and also glass cleaner for the scanners to make sure that we had the best images of these artifacts. And then in some cases we had participants that had a lot of items, so we would have a second volunteer in there who would be recording the metadata, which Presley will talk more about. But so they were recording everything about those items and trying to keep up with it. But one of the things, not only were we trying to collect the artifacts and preserve those, but we also wanted to know the stories of them. So in the rooms, there was the microphone so that we could share just kind of what was the artifact, what did it mean to the participants, but also what were the connections to Towns County and also to preserving the languages and the literacy practices of the area. So we made sure that was very important to collect. So just examples of the other two rooms, and you'll see Presley in here, but this was one of the rooms with that 3D scanner in the setup, so it was like very friendly conversation that was happening. And also our fourth room, which was more for our bigger artifacts that were coming in. So passing it off to you, Presley.
So to start us off with metadata, everyone wants to know what is metadata. So metadata is essentially information about information, or data about data, but it's more than that. We categorize and put items in boxes on a daily basis, like from what we watch on television to grouping, from our identity, from being in the North Georgia mountains to being from the state of Georgia, an American. We put things in categories. So essentially, metadata is about gathering all of the information about the subject at hand. And we can start with a general example, this is an example of Netflix. We use metadata, Netflix uses metadata to categorize the movies and television shows that they offer. So if you click on thrillers and you just like click it will take you to a whole group of films that would be categorized as thrillers. Now you can go into more in depth, like take the Minority Report. You can like think about, well, who is actually in that film and who's the director, all that. So metadata, of course, answers the essential question about like the 5 W's, like who, what, when, where, why, and then of course how. But it's more than that. Metadata is about not only the context of the item at hand, but it is also about the person who is actually gathering the data, and you also have to keep that in mind as well. So y'all are actually pretty lucky because you get to see a real life example of what I am currently doing. Georgia Tech is letting me take the special training through Library of Congress, where I get to create original name records and submit them, and they become the official names that are used in Library of the Library of Congress. So, I want to show you what good metadata looks like versus bad metadata. So the record on the left is a record of my Dean of Libraries, and you can see there's only 2 lines. Like, it's essentially her name and a line about her first publication. That's it. You do not know anything. The record on the right is what I actually originally created and had to actually get my feedback from the reviewer about it today. But, so there was not a name authority for one of the professors of the School of Agriculture, Douglas Allen, and you can see what, just based off of like what's listed there, how much more in depth you can go into with metadata. Like, I know it's a little blurry and you can't see it from there, but there is a location to include where he was born, where his place of death was, like where he went to Harvard, like architectural school. So, like the fact that there's a line for that, like there's different subject terms that are associated with it. So this can kind of show you like there is a general approach to metadata that you can use on an everyday basis, and then here is a complex example. So what this means is when it came to the digitalization project, it was very important that we collected as much information as possible. And I don't know, the ones who volunteered for the event probably were sick of the item inventory form, but it was very important because it's the backbone of keeping the items and the histories and the stories alive. So it's essentially metadata is about it's like a map that is guiding us to like figure out this complex space of all of the information that is being thrown at us. And yes, you can go ahead. Okay, and then I know Lindsey touched briefly about how digitalization and preservation, like digitalization is not preservation, in the sense that like preservation usually in the general sense of the term refers to like a physical tangible item, but digital preservation is not only scanning the items to make them online, to make it online, available online, in a computer electronic format, but it is about like thinking further ahead and not only storing that information, backing up the files, storing the files, but also preserving it in a way that our technology will be okay for what is coming into the future. So, so Kennesaw, as Lindsey was mentioning earlier, did have the resources and funds to help us start this project and gave us a starting place to house all of the information. So they have what is called the SERV repository, which is repository is also used interchangeably with archives. You usually hear repository when it comes to the digital environment, but so anyway, like they did offer us the chance to be able to house this and start the project. So yes, this is an example of what our Towns County project will essentially look like at Kennesaw. You can see that from this example that Kennesaw has currently, that there's like, this is an example of the place-based special collection. There's a banner entitled Welcoming the Visitor, a search for to find items by date, donor, name, topic, and a short history of Towns County, the Historical Society, and this project. And this, once you start clicking, and on the main page, it will take you into a specific item, and like it will go into detail about persons and families, like with pictures, a short biography. Some, like if we are lucky enough to have the oral history stories with audio and video, so these items are searchable and will be linked by topic across collections. And so that too is part of the metadata universe too, is this whole concept of you go down this rabbit hole, and by clicking on this one topic, it will suggest, oh, well, here's a related term. Let me click on this. And it will open up a whole new page that is related to what you were just looking at. So yes. And so that is essentially the metadata side of things.
And I am so glad I'm not a metadata librarian. All right. But you can see, whoa. All right. A little dark. All right. We almost got a bit of a show. All right. So you can see that as we think about our 3 goals, how important Presley was to this process of being able to not only collect and digitize, anyone can do that when they snap a picture with their phone and upload it to Facebook. But the idea of preserving all of the history and narratives with the items permanently in KSU's collection, she was essential to that work. And I know you spent a lot of long hours poring over Excel spreadsheets to make that happen, so we're very grateful to have you on the team. And you can see that we are now, check. In terms of our first goal, we're well on our way to making it happen. That KSU collection will be live, hopefully by the end of this academic year, so around May or April. So hopefully we'll be able to share that with you once it goes live. Now for me, I am an educator, a middle school teacher originally, and now a teacher educator at Mercer University. So I was very interested in this second goal. How are we preserving Appalachian language, literacy practices, and histories for the next generation? Thinking about that school-based dissemination piece of how are we passing this on to our younger children in schools in Towns County. So with that in mind, we had several stations that were set up at the Swappin Stories event where we did not send any of the data to Kennesaw State. We kept everything we collected in these rooms specifically for the youth of Towns County. So in talking to Carrie and her different colleagues at Towns County Middle School in particular, we were thinking about how could we collect data that would be meaningful in the classroom. One of the stations we came up with was an Appalachian folklore room, where when you go into the room, you have the ability to sit with a computer and a microphone by yourself or with an assistant, and you could tell all the old wives' tales that you know, all the folklore you've learned. Some people just told funny stories, usually about things that had happened to other people and not them within Towns County. So we collected all of these stories with the thought of, we can turn these into curriculum. We didn't quite know how yet, but we knew we could. We also had another beautiful session set up in another room, if we could keep going, with this lovely poster, and I mean, it's about the size of this projector. It is huge, and it was donated completely for free by Mountain Graphics. We're very grateful to them. And this big map had all of the communities within Towns County marked in red, all of the unnamed roads in gray, and bodies of water. So when folks came into the map room, we would hand them a dry erase marker and say, add up all the parts to this map that are missing. And that's how we learned about where an old drive-in movie theater was, where everybody used to take their dates when they were courting. Because back then, you courted, you didn't date, all right? And we also filled in name stories. How the heck did we get the name Bug Scuffle? Because that doesn't quite roll off the tongue. There has to be a story behind it. And so as people were filling in all of these memories, all of these name stories, all of these landmarks, we were also video recording and audio recording them. Again, not for public viewing. This is for within the community knowledge that we want to pass down to the next generation. So after we had this 2.5-day Swappin Stories event, Carrie and I got to work. We spent the next 2 days working on how can we turn all of these beautiful artifacts into curriculum. And it's such great timing because in the state of Georgia, as of this year, they're piloting new English language arts standards. How many of you know or love a teacher that works within Georgia right now? Okay, first of all, y'all need to go find some teachers, become friends with them, and show them some love. Because next year's going to be very hard on them. They have to completely redo the entire curriculum that they're teaching, which is hard work. And so I was helping Carrie to rethink what could next year look like for her as she's redesigning her curriculum with the new ELA standards from the state of Georgia. And we decided we wanted to keep Towns County. Right now, it gets higher test scores than pretty much any county in the Northeast. It is a very high producing school. So we want to keep that. So we want to not just meet these new standards, we want to exceed them. So we started thinking creatively. For example, there's a standard that requires you to deconstruct words using etymology of Greek and Latin roots. How many of y'all can still do that? I'll take that laughter to mean nope. So we thought instead of just Greek or Latin roots, you know what kind of root words we use a whole lot around here in Towns County? Cherokee. So we have added a Cherokee root word section to her curriculum. So now for the final activity within that unit, the students are going to do name history stories of place names throughout Towns County. And they're going to use some of the primary documents and resources provided by community members to cite their evidence in that research project. And that's just one example. We did this for every single unit across her entire school year. So now her entire curriculum will be taught through the lens of Appalachian language, names, identities, literacy practices, histories, and storytelling. Which means every single unit is also going to integrate, if not documents and resources that we were able to archive and digitize this past summer, but also we are pulling from Foxfire. We're pulling from different authors and poets that we're trying to find who are centered right here in Towns County. And what Presley shared about being able to add entries to the Library of Congress, she's adding digital card catalogs that are making sure different authors are known nationally and globally that haven't been recorded before. And that's the struggle we're having with integrating new curriculum, new authors, new poets who are coming out of Towns County. Many of them have never made it onto the national scene for people to know and be able to discover them. So as Presley is adding these new names and people into the Library of Congress, not only can we use them in our curriculum here in Towns County, but now they're discoverable to other scholars and teachers throughout the state, throughout the nation, throughout the world. So now Towns County history is being used not just to pass down to the next generation in Towns County, but for all over the globe, which is very exciting. So in terms of preserving Appalachian language, literacy practices, and histories for community and school-based educators, we're working on it. By the end of next year, we hope that it's students up here presenting with some of the things that they've learned in school with Carrie. All right, I'll hand it back to Lindsey.
So our next goal was, to demonstrate that the Historical Society is a viable organization to receive funds and investments for research room and an archival space. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the results of the project through that lens. One of the things that we had was a large unnamed photo wall. If y'all were there for the event, you probably participated in this area. So this was a great waiting area, but also there was a lot of photographs, existing photographs that the Historical Society had that maybe we had a name, right, attached to it, or maybe we didn't. And even if we had those, we might not have had that metadata piece, that background information. Okay, yes, this is a picture of so-and-so, but where was this taken? What was the context of this photo? What building are they standing in front of? What's the history of that building? And so there were different people who were answering those kind of, like Presley said, those 5, those who, what, when, where, and why questions about those photographs. The photographs had transparent page protectors on them, and then also we used those transparent Post-its so that the photos, again, were really preserved well and not damaged in that process. And then the next thing that we did as well was when Leah and Carrie were working on those educational pieces, the other part of the research team went out to work on the kind of corroborating historical narratives that we heard about during those 2 days of storytelling. So a lot of people talked about bridges that were washed out during floods and how you could still see like the old structures, like when the water was at a certain level. And so we went to some of those locations to see those things. People mentioned certain graves and dates of births and deaths and things. And so we went out and, tried to visit some of those grave sites if possible. We did some home visits to individuals who wanted to come and share their oral history but couldn't due to their age or their mobility, and we're able to complete those oral histories and write up those oral histories again for that preservation piece. And then also we were able to get some historical artifacts that kind of verified stories from participants. So for example, there was a brick that was donated to the Historical Society that was made with slave labor. And we were able to find a census that kind of like confirmed the verification that there were slaves in Towns County during that time, to kind of again create those local text sets that have both like physical artifacts and then primary documents that complete the set. So we want to continue that. So just in these 2 days of the event, we had 25 participants, collected 18 oral histories, 445 items were digitized for permanent preservation. 2 items were directly donated to the Historical Society. One of those was the brick that I mentioned, and then the other one was a drawing, a painting of the Hooper Hotel that burned. And so the individual came in and she said, I want to donate this. I found it, and I think it's important, and I want the Historical Society to have it. And then we also had 10 folklore stories, 30 place-based stories connected to the map, and then there were multiple never-before-seen photographs and documents that kind of filled in some of those narrative gaps of the county's history. There were even some things, and Mr. Taylor can correct me if I'm wrong, I think there were even some new things that Mr. Taylor hadn't seen yet, which, you know, is a very big feat to do. So it was a very exciting event, and especially, you know, just with those 2 days that we were able to have such a great turnout. So again, what we want to do moving forward is just kind of continue to build off of the base that we had for this summer. So we want to continue to identify funding sources to continue and expand the work. We want to hold additional events. Again, hopefully with being able to incorporate more youth where they're doing some of that collection of those oral histories, going out and interviewing the individuals in the community, taking some of those technology pieces on. Sharing the process with other communities, because it's not just Towns County, right, that's not super well represented in the digital world. North Georgia in general, even within Appalachian studies lenses, there's not a lot of information out there, and so we want to kind of be able to share that process with other communities so that in general North Georgia history is well preserved. And then also to advocate for the Historical Society to have a permanent space for this type of work to happen, because there's a lot of really rich history here, and also that needs to be preserved. And so in order to do that, there needs to be a space for that to happen, for people to come in and be able to collect that data. And then on the educational side, Leah is working really a lot with Carrie to kind of, you know, look at that new curriculum and expand it potentially to other grade levels and courses, which is really exciting. So that kind of comes into our third goal. So again, still working on it, but well on the way to demonstrating the need for that. The information is out there, and people need a space to come and share their stories, and not just, you know, people realizing that like everyone's story is valuable and all of this history is worth preserving, not just, you know, certain members of the community. So everyone feeling like they can come in and like keep things that are really valuable to them and still be able to digitize them and share that information with the world, or the county in general. So that's all we had. We just wanted to open it up for questions, ideas, and suggestions. And just again, thank you all so much for all of your time working on the project and all the awesome work that you're doing through the Historical Society.
Yes. And it's okay to clap if you want to. Oh, thank you. All right. But also, Tyler, do we have enough time if there are some questions that we can field? All right. Yeah. So while we're here, what else would you like to know or hear about the project, what we've done, and where we're going?
Did they confuse you?
Metadata confused me totally, but I don't need to know that.
She had to get a whole degree in it to understand it.
I confused myself on it. So actually, oh no, Dad's gonna be the first.
Is this accessible today where we can, like those stories of
No,
we can access it today?
So one of the things that we did was put all of the information, including the metadata, onto 4 different external hard drives. One was gifted directly to Towns County Historical Society. So you have access to it as long as you have access to the external hard drive, which you haven't lost yet, right?
No.
Okay, excellent. It's propping open the door probably. So you have access to it. Now, if you wanted to log on to KSU's online archives and repository, that won't be available for another 5 to 6 months. You saw how detailed that metadata was. So they have 2 interns that are working to not only upload all of these, arrange them into a website, but make sure all the metadata is collected with the items. That's going to take a little while because Presley really did her job well. In fact, when we handed them the Excel spreadsheet with all the metadata, they called it the gold standard of anything they've ever received from a community partner.
And I will say, just go ahead and plan, Marcy, that you will be needed in the future because, your handwriting is on point, and I really couldn't have done it without you. So just go ahead and know you are the official metadata, assistant from now on.
Meeting has been appointed. I do want to say something. Priority 3 was, trying to, find archival space for the Historical Society. For those who are unaware, we have records right now dating back through the county's history. Right now they're being stored in the Old Rockdale Museum, some of them in the Law Library. It's not the best spot for it right now. So that's when they reached out to me to start this project. They're like, what is something the Historical Society needs to come out of this? And I said, well, obviously, we want to spread what we have, the information, but I said, we need a place to store this and be able to do this ourselves. We need to be able to house this stuff somewhere. So that's where that idea came from, so that we could have a research center, which has been a goal, Sandra, how long now?
Years.
And that to store these documents, some of them dating back to 1856. I mean, the true beginnings of the county. And they're currently just sitting in storage with no way to access them. So that is where this is all, trying to get this headed to, is to create a place to put this stuff to where it's publicly accessible, either in person, online, through the web, so that generations now and after us can have this knowledge.
Is there a plan to have an event like this again next summer?
Yes. So, I'll turn it off. Is that a subtle sign I'm talking too much?
No, I didn't want to
Yes, we currently have a grant that is under review, and if funded, would allow us, the same team, to come back this upcoming summer and do the project again with some lessons learned from this past summer. But the true hope is that we would have youth join us. So the idea being we get middle and high school students to be a part of the digitizing efforts, and then get more intergenerational conversations happening, because that's how the true preservation happens, not just digitally, but through the passing down of stories.
Between now and then, are there...
We would want to assign an entire part of the team to just sit with Mr. Taylor and record him.
I was just wondering, between now and next summer, about how many people are we going to be recording in their homes, for example? I know one lady, but I don't know anybody else.
As many as y'all would like to. We'd love to train you, show you how.
I mean, how many residents are going to be interviewed and tell their stories?
We don't know yet. So as of...
I've got a list of several that have reached out and said that they want to be. And I know the one that you're referring to, and she's one of them.
So you have some more?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So there's several that we need to get the interviews done of them.
Keep the work going on.
And those of us that have lived in the same house or place for generations, I bet a lot of people have stuff, paper stuff from their grandparents on that would be of interest in this. I know I do. And I'm sure that that's something that everybody that has been here for generations would have.
And there's always just that pressure of, it feels like we're always running out of time, right? Like there's such an impetus to do it now, to move quickly, and time is our enemy. So the sooner we can get funding, the sooner we can get a research room, the better, because we know these stories are here and we want to capture them while we have the opportunity.
And that's where the idea of context comes into play, because like I was saying earlier, like if you have a photograph from 1915, what that subject or individual like experience, all that, is completely different than what we are experiencing in 2024. And so that's why it's also important to consider the context of not only that time period, but our time period as well. Like Caitlin was talking a lot about the technologies that we use. What we use now has to be documented, because in a year's time, that like technology might like go away, and we have to. That's why, like, it was also important for us to document exactly the model of the scanner that we used, like the date that we performed those interviews, things like that, because like the future generations are going to be looking at like our interview process and like, okay, well, they didn't have like the like artificial intelligence like 5.0. They were like, they didn't even have AI. So like, but we needed to document that so that the future generation knows what we are using to preserve what's going on in 1950.
So what I heard is if we don't move fast, AI is going to just do it for us.
Trust me, AI was a big help.
And AI has never killed a hog, so it'll be horrible.
I'm going to type that into ChatGPT tonight, how to kill a hog. All right, thank you all so much. I hope that we'll be back when the repository launches and maybe bring you some of the stories that we collected specifically from the event as well, and show off some of those artifacts from the community.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.